Welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
A platform we use to explore varying perspectives and opinion through candid conversation.
We chat about philosophy, business, and all things life. I'm Shaun the Hustle.
And I'm Les the Flow.
Let's go.
All right, bro. Today is my turn for a topic.
Sure is.
And I think this topic might come as a little bit of a left field thing. I don't think we've really talked about this much, so it should make for an interesting discussion. But I want to talk about the concept of, or the idea of idols, or, grandiose. These two things have sort of been playing on my mind a little bit as of late. And really, to put into context, it's just about this sense of, admiration towards these sorts of things that are higher than ourselves, or we give them that sort of stature in our minds, and then subsequently it leads down to like a little bit of a road of self-comparison and not meeting the mark, so to speak. So I guess we don't necessarily need to talk about that, specifically as such, but I want to talk about the concept of, idols, this culture that we live in that is quite idolatrous as well, and this sense of yearning or feeling towards a grand lifestyle or anything that is grand,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what comes to mind when I bring up things like that?
Lots of stuff flies around my mind when you bring up stuff like that. Like, there's obviously, when you say the word idols, there's plenty of different types of idols, right? And there's idols in different genres. So like, you can think about things that people idolize, or there's people that are idolized, and then there's things that are idolized, right?
Mm.
And then also my mind automatically goes to like false idols and the concept of that, and how that's perpetuated and viewed as well. So I guess first thing is, like, with idols, is it's just something or someone that people look up to for whatever reason. And I think there's a bunch of reasons that people do that. I think it's also interesting that when people idolize things, there's like a magnetism to it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. Like, there's generally an allure, a magnetism of some form. There's people are drawn to idols,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's two parts to that. There's the what's coming in for them in terms of their perception of that idol, and then the reason that they have that magnetism or that draw is definitely because of things that they've experienced, the beliefs that they hold, right? What's important to them, what they value, and then something in that idol resonates with one of those values or beliefs, and then they're drawn to the idol. And I think that's why people idolize different things.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe we can start with our own, I guess, personal views or personal idols as such, and see if we can break that down a little bit. I mean, do you have any people that you would consider, or things that you consider like idols or idolize?
Yes, I've actually thought about this a lot over the years. And I'm actually of the belief that you should idolize no man. I think there's things that we idolize. There's things that I revere, for sure, but I don't idolize anyone. And by idolize, I mean I don't put them on this pedestal. I think that's another element of idolizing something. Like, you place them up on this pedestal, and they've got this kind of holier presence of being about them in your mind.
Yeah.
When you idolize them, right? Or if you idolize a certain way of life or a belief, if you're religious, you idolize the beliefs of the religion sometimes. So I have thought about this a bit, and through, learning and reading and a lot of pondering and rumination, I've just come to the point where, for me, I don't idolize any man.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly how I came to that, but it just makes sense to me. especially in terms of people. Like we're all very different, and all of us flawed in some way.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, and also, none of us never know the full story of someone else. I think that's a big part of it for me, right? Like, we see people, we often see the best of them because that's the parts that they want the world to see and the parts that they put forward. And there's a lot of, you know, behind the scenes action going on in someone's life that most people aren't privy to. Even their closest, nearest and dearest aren't privy to some of those things. You know, their partners, spouses, things like that. And we're all human. We're all flawed in some way. Not that that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
but it's just, you know, I think when we idolize things, the flaws kind of fall away in our mind, and we focus on one part. And to fully focus on certain elements and be ignorant to the others that make that person who they are, I think is a bit dangerous, because then if generally when you idolize something, you want to be more like it.
Yeah.
And if you're moving towards this ideal, like that's a thing. Idols are usually like an ideal.
Persona or something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. When you don't know the full story, and then you're trying to model that, I think you're kind of like, not that you're going to fail at that, but it's just, I'm trying to find the words. I just don't think it's going to work out for you the way that you would want it to. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you see someone who you idolize, or you may idolize, and you think they've got it all going on, but then there's these parts of his life you don't know about, or there's things that they have to do in order to be that person that you idolize that you don't want to do, or that are very hard, or that just don't align with other beliefs you have. And that's why I keep coming back to this. You just don't know the full story. And also, I think trying to model other people and simply what they do isn't always fulfilling. Do you know what I mean? Like, and we're all different. And the reason I talk about us all being different is that we all have different beliefs, and what's important to one person may not be important to you. What worked for one person may not work for you. How one person operates may not be an optimal way for you to operate and perform. And it might not actually land you up to where you think you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from there's a lot there, obviously, but I think a key delineation or discernment that you made was the difference between idolatry and reverence. You know,
Yep.
that for me is very important. You know, in terms of having no idols as holding no person as an idol, I understand that, and I agree with that. In that, you should put no one on a pedestal that seems unreachable for yourself, right? Because, like you said, they are also human as you are. And I guess the difference between that and reverence is you see something in them that you admire, but it's not to say that you use that as something that you want to necessarily mimic or be like per se. It might be a motivational factor. It might simply be something that you find fascinating or impressive, or you know, the feats that certain people have achieved in their life. You know, knowing what it is like to be human and living. You know? Like an example that like an easy example to use, I find the physical, you know, feats that professional sportsmen, what they're able to do with their bodies, it's amazing to me. And you know, LeBron James is one of those guys who I've watched and I've just seen, look, he's a beast. He's just like a physical specimen. You know, he's obviously athletically gifted, and he could have done a number of sports professionally without an issue. Like, you know, he was a very good, you know, college football player, as well as you know, like he is now. He's still one of the best, or if not, arguably one of the best to ever do it in basketball, right? But like you said, in terms of reverence of their physical ability and all that sort of thing versus idolizing him, it's very different. Like, do I want to be like LeBron James? It's a very open-ended question in terms of like what part of LeBron James would I want to be like? No, I don't. I just, like I said, I very much admire what he can do with his body at the highest level, on a basketball court. But he is also a very admirable human being at the same time. Outside of being an athlete, he's a strong advocate and spokesperson for human rights in terms of the black person's movement. And he built a fucking school in his hometown in Ohio, Akron, Ohio, to help children get educated in a area where he grew up and he wasn't as fortunate. He knew the struggle and he was just giving back and trying to help people through that. So I find that I guess his human trait admirable. He's a good person outside of just being a basketball player, but I admire the fact that he uses his platform, which is basketball, right? NBA. He's known for that, to, I guess, represent his human beliefs and fight for the rights that he, believes in, which is great. But in terms of like the difference between that and I guess just admiring the traits of this human and what he does for other people and just speaking truth, that's what I see it as, There's a deeper purpose to this man, LeBron James, than his professional accolades, which are showcased on the world stage. He has a more powerful purpose to fight. And I admire that about him. But in terms of being an idol and wanting to be like him, like you said, there are certain things that you set yourself up for, which may not turn out the best for you.
Yeah.
Like if that was an example, I could never be like him in terms of a professional basketball player. Obviously, I'm like barely 6 foot, and I weigh like 73 kilos or something like that, and I'm just not very good. I'm okay. I've played all my life, but I'm still, nothing in comparison to him. So, those are like just very simple, outlaid physical barriers that I am unable to, overcome in order to, quote unquote, be like him. But yeah, I think there's, like you said, idol versus reverence, very important discernment there. And like you said, in terms of it, and it's very, I think it's a very interesting thing to have in this current environment of the world, I suppose. You touched on it in terms of what people want the world to see of themselves and what they don't. And like, that's classic social media.
Yeah.
So is it the person that you idolize, or is it the idea that they're selling you on social media or, on the public arena?
Yeah. I think that's the interesting part of it is like, what exactly are you idolizing, right? Are you idolizing the reality or an ideal?
Yeah. And like, obviously, I think in this day and age, they sort of go hand in hand with this like aggrandized lifestyle and all these like grand ideas, and everything's like scaled up. And they sort of come hand in hand. But maybe we can talk about, I guess, what that does to people or does for people.
Yeah.
In terms of having idols or wanting to, or holding people in high regard that, that we want to be like, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that from that angle?
So I have a pretty strong opinion on that, and that is that when you idolize people, you tend to give away your own power. And what I mean by that is, a lot of the times when you idolize people, you think that there's something about them, or you're placing them on a pedestal, and there's things that they do that you could never do, and that's why you tend to idolize them, right? Like they're at this such a higher level than you, or higher level than those around them, or people that you know, right? That puts them in a different category to you, and that's why we tend to idolize people. And I feel like that gives away your power, right? Because subconsciously, a lot of the time, people think, "Oh, I could never do that," when in fact you could, and not being like foo-foo about it, but you can, right? Especially that's why, like for me, I idolize no man, because I know you're human, and it's very likely that if I applied my effort in a certain way, I would be able to achieve a lot of the things that the people that we idolize can do, or are doing, or have ever done. Things like sports and stuff like that, yes, there are limitations, 100%, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to be a quarterback, or, I'm not going to be Mr. Olympia. My body's not set up like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to think about why you idolize people in certain genres, or, what is it about them? Is it the fact that they are just the best at what they do? Because you can be the best at something, right? Or is it what about the qualities of them that you idolize? Is it that you actually revere? All right, coming back to like idolizing something versus having reverence for it. And yeah, the whole notion of you taking away your own power by placing something so far out of reach in your mind is something that I choose not to do, and I don't believe it's the case. That's why, like, I actually truly believe that we're more powerful than we think, and we put these limitations on ourselves because we see people do things, and just because we don't have a frame of reference for it, or we've never actually in person met someone like that yet, that there's something different about them, and a lot of time there's not. And I'm sure you've experienced this. Most people have. There's someone who you've placed on a pedestal somehow, and you don't know much about them. Maybe you've never met them, but then you meet them and you have all these ideas about them. And then when you meet them, a lot of those things come crashing down. Like, you think they're a certain way and they're not. Or you think they'll be this way about something, and it's very different. And they become humanized. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like, you've just seen them in a certain light, right? And generally, you've seen them in a certain light for so long, and you've built this story in your mind about what they're like and who they are and how they do things. And then you learn what they actually do, and how they actually are, and what they actually think when you come into contact with them and you actually have an experience with them, right? And then there's been people as well that I've formed deeper relationships with, and you start to learn more about them, and how they are and how they think on an even deeper level. And then you realize, man, as people, we all have these, patterns of thought and these idiosyncrasies, and some of us just over-index in certain areas, and it's why we tend to do well in the eyes of others. So, that and really thinking about that, and the fact that I've actually experienced that a lot of times has, put me in the mindset now that, like, there's things definitely to admire about other people, but no one's actually not worth it. But like, yeah, like, I can't really put it another way, is worth putting on that pedestal, because I feel that having reverence for yourself, and trying to build yourself into a person that you're really proud of, is what matters, right? And when you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, you're spending that energy on trying to on that comparison, instead of actually doing something to make yourself better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it boils down to for me, man.
Yeah. And I think to, continue on that thought, there's like, to put someone on a pedestal or to idolize someone and want to, follow them or be like them, that's mimicry, right? It's wanting to, copy, someone else's identity, essentially.
Yeah.
The identity that you see of that person. So again, the same example, LeBron James, like for me, if I idolized him and I wanted to be like him, then I just want to be like the LeBron James that I see in the through the public eye. But what that takes away again is this sense of truth for yourself.
Yeah.
It takes you further away from your own truth, because you're essentially turning your back on your truth and walking towards someone else's that is being presented throughout the public arena, And that, to me, is the importance. And, going back to why I admire someone such as LeBron James is because he speaks his truth, Not so much, again, yes, his professional accolades as a basketball player, they're impressive. And from an entertainment standpoint, it's just something that is amazing to me, right? But at the same time, he's just someone that simply has gone through another route in order to speak his truth, And for me, that is the most important thing for any individual, simply to understand what their truth is and to speak it, not to necessarily mimic anyone else's, and think that that's cool to do. I think that's the thing, right? When we talk about idols and why people have them, why does someone, aspire to be like, LeBron James? Why does someone aspire to be like, Steve Jobs? Why does someone aspire to be like, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? It's these mental stories that are built, but they're also a cultural narrative that these are the top echelon of what society is. These people have reached the top of civilization as we have built it.
Yeah.
Thus, we want to be there. But again, is that important to every individual? Is it truly important to every individual? Because realistically, again, like I talk about this a lot, and I always say, like, there's these quotes out there in the internet and the ether that say that The Matrix wasn't a movie, it's a documentary, And I feel like it's true. I believe in that to a certain degree, in that it paints a picture of what society is in an artistic sense, in an artistic way, right? But going back to, idolizing and aggrandizement and things like that, if you think about it, it's within this matrix, this bubble that has been created, which is society, which is civilization. But that in itself does not necessarily encompass life. We can step outside of that and it's going to be different. That stuff may not mean anything, in the whole collective.
Yeah.
This is just one aspect of life that we can choose to be a part of or not.
Yep.
No,
I get that. And I think, the reason that we tend to idolize people, or people idolize different people, or is because they think that they want what they have. And more precisely, they think they want what they see that person to have.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of things that go along with achieving at a high level in any arena. And people tend to just see the accolades, the nice, shiny parts of it, right? And, it makes me think about, I finally watched The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, right? And in the first few episodes, I'm not going to ruin anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but in the first few episodes, you watch it and you think, wow, man, this guy had an amazing life. And, he worked hard and did all these things, but it's really grand and he was well known and, he was the best and he was feared throughout the league because of his prowess. And then you learn more and more about what it was actually like to be like him from his own mouth. And you're like, yeah, there's a lot of shit that did not seem enjoyable at all. Right? But at the time when, he was at his peak, or the peak of his fame, where he was the most well-known personality in the world, right? Everybody would have thought how amazing it would be to be like him, or most people would have, right?
Yeah.
And then you pull back the veil and you see what it actually was like for him, and you're like, oh, I don't really know if I'd want to live like that,
Well, I think that's a common thread for a lot of people who experience fame, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's why you see that there's a lot of people who we feel have gotten to, such heights. And like Hollywood is a good barometer for people because it's, in the public eye so much. A lot of people, have committed suicide and killed themselves at the peak of their powers, And like, again, I can't say that we'd attribute it only to one thing or another. There's obviously a lot of underlying things that would have gone into those situations for each individual that had chosen that path. But like, it's a common thread. It's very common to hear those sorts of stories. Like in the UFC, when champions lose their belt, they're asked what it feels like, and oftentimes they would say there's a pressure that's lifted from their shoulders because as a champion you have different responsibilities, to the company, to the media. Like some fighters will have to do 300 plus interviews a year, and they're constantly in the public eye. And you don't even need to watch like a documentary like The Last Dance to feel what that would be like. If you just sat back and asked yourself the question, would you like it if everyone followed you, everyone knew who you were, and scrutinized every single move that you had
And thought that
made?
they knew who you were.
Yeah, for every single move that you made.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't like that. I'd fucking hate it, And I don't feel like there's many people that would actually like that, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but that's my feeling,
Yeah. Well, I think it also speaks to the point of you don't know what it's like until you've actually experienced something, and you think it's going to be a certain way, and because you have not been in that situation or you don't know anyone personally who has, like you're idolizing something that you don't actually know much about.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And you mentioned something earlier, which I want to come back to, which is you said mimicry, and that's interesting to me when it comes to idols because there's a big difference between mimicking something and modeling on it, right?
Totally.
I think when it comes to idols, that's one of the issues with idolizing something is that people tend to mimic what they idolize. And they do that without consideration for the wider context and their own personal circumstances
Yeah.
and, the context directly surrounding them, right? Whenever you see someone in a certain situation, there's a whole raft of events and things that have led up to that. And you're just seeing it from one angle. So for you to try and copy that exactly, one probably isn't going to actually be a carbon copy.
Well, it's never going to be a carbon copy because even your immediate environment is going to, dictate a difference there.
Yeah.
Regardless if you apply the same approach, to the T.
Yeah. But my point is, even say if you're in the exact same environment, you've been doing something or you think you've been doing something for the exact same, and that's the point. It's like, it's your interpretation of something, right? And when you just mimic something and copy it without real thought about the reasons why and why something could have worked or why something is the way it is, I feel like a lot of times we're setting ourselves up for disappointment because it's probably not going to turn out how we think is going to turn out, and our expectation of that not being met is going to disappoint us.
Totally.
However, when you look at modeling based on someone that you respect or revere, or in that scenario, you can take the things that you revere, you actually process them, and then model your actions based on your own actual context and your own situation. And then, more likely than not, it's going to work out for you much better. Right? Like, there's people that I respect and I admire a lot, right? From what I see that they have achieved. I don't know them personally, right? People that have done really well in business or have done really well philanthropically or, have achieved certain feats. But I don't want to be them,
Yeah.
right? Like if I see Johnny and Johnny's doing something amazing and he lives a life from what I see, that's like a life that I want to live. I don't actually want to be Johnny. I just want to experience these parts of Johnny's life that I see,
Yeah.
right? And then if I see that, they, it appears to me that they respect people and they treat people with respect. I'm like, cool. Maybe that's one element that helped them to achieve what they've achieved. That seems like a behavior that would be smart to model and also just right thing to do as a human, right?
Yeah.
But if someone who you admire and you revere or even idolize, like a sportsman, what you see about them is their work ethic, right?
Totally.
Model the work ethic, but you don't have to talk like that person and walk like that person. The way they talk and the way they walk might have nothing to do with how they perform, right? It's a fact that their work ethic and the way they practice and the dedication they put into whatever they do has led them to where they are. So I would look at modeling those aspects of that person, but I wouldn't try and like walk like Mike, talk like Mike, be like Mike. And there's definitely something to be said about trying to get into someone's shoes and think the way they think in certain situations, but to try and be that exact person, which is what people do a lot of time when they idolize people, I think that's not really going to work out.
Yeah. And I think you said a pivotal word there, and it's all about expectation, right? Like for yourself, and expectation just comes from a story that you tell yourself, and
Yeah.
that's all it is, a story that you tell yourself, whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter. Like there is no actuality to the stories that you tell yourself in your mind, It doesn't matter like whether it's based on, X amount of years of, experience or whatever it is, there's still mental chatter, right? And I think that's like the danger with it, in terms of like idolizing. To me, like if you peel it back a few more layers, like it's wanting to be somewhere else, that means there is a sense of escape.
Yeah, man.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a unhappiness or a discontentment with whatever situation that the person is in themselves right now.
Yeah.
Like there is a very big difference between simply being ambitious and wanting to improve and become better versus just hating the experience of life and wanting something that seems more happy, more abundant, more grandiose, more fruitful in every aspect. So I think that is an important thing to sort of think about when people are taking on or idolizing people. Is it something that you simply need to reflect upon and use it as a mirror to see what is going on in your own life, to sort of what is it that you want to escape from?
That's such a good point, man.
You know?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, what is it that you see that you want so much that you don't have?
And a lot of the time,
And why is that an issue for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I feel like it is about like money. A lot of the time people just don't. They want the riches that come with being famous and all that sort of thing. Because,
Or admiration.
yeah, that's sort of like acceptance.
Yeah.
Praise. It all comes down to a lot of these things that, again, built up as the pinnacle of society. Because you think about the social media culture that we live in, the amount of followers kind of indicates that you're someone that people like and you want to be liked. But what is behind all of that? After those likes, after that reverence. If you think about, you sit in the shoes of someone who has like 15 million followers or something on Instagram. Do they even know like a fraction of those people that are following them? And what do they do for their life? You know, what do they actually do for their life? You know,
One thing that keeps coming to mind right now as well is when it comes to idols and idolizing things is I feel like there's a certain blindness to it. Like when you idolize something, you're kind of blinded to certain elements about that person or whatever it is that you're idolizing. If it's like a movement or a set of beliefs, right? And the danger in that is that when you turn a blind eye to certain elements of things, it can be very dangerous, right?
Yep.
And there could be things there that actually make your beliefs or what you think that person or that belief system is come undone. And that's just ignorance,
Yep.
right? But they say ignorance is bliss
Yeah.
because a lot of times, people do idolize people or things. They just follow blindly and try to mimic them, right? But they turn a blind eye to certain elements of that person or that thing. And the fact is, all of it encapsulates the reality of it.
Yep.
And, when you just follow something blindly, you miss the dangers, you miss the pitfalls, you miss the things that can affect you in a way that you don't want to be affected.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it, and a good example really is are those people who are like religious extremists, you know? I think that's a common example of people who, I guess, idolize an ideal to the point where it narrows their perception on life.
And I think that's the key to it, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like it narrows your perception.
And like, I always talk about this, and I feel it's pivotal to all aspects of life. Like, extremism in one way or another, like whether good or bad, it just doesn't work. I mean, because like we're talking about right now, if there is an entire spectrum of perspective and thought and viewpoints, where if we're extreme about one thing or another, then we're ignoring everything else that is on the other side of the spectrum. Which, again, like if you don't have a good balanced view of things, if you don't see the whole picture, then you're not getting the whole picture.
Yeah.
It's like that story where there's 6 different scientists that are looking at different parts of an elephant. They're all blindfolded, and they're sort of told to examine different parts of the elephant, like the foot, the tail, the trunk, and asked to tell us what it is that they're examining, and obviously they're saying all different things because they're only examining one part of the whole. So to be extreme is simply to just look at one portion of the animal and say that that's what it is. So yeah, like I think that it comes down to, I guess, we always talk about open-mindedness and having a radically open mind. I think that is like super important in all aspects of life, and perhaps idolatry is one of those things that sort of just push you towards one viewpoint, which then dismisses every other aspect.
Yeah, for sure. And like when you talk about, extremism and just being extreme about anything, it's different to focus, right? So like, you can be highly focused on something for a period of time, but then you need to shift your focus at some point. If you focus on something for too long, like you said, like your perception is narrowed, and there can be things going on around you that you miss. And it's not to say that being extreme in all cases is bad, but to be extreme absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with idolatry a lot, is you're fixated on this thing and you're not seeing other parts of the puzzle.
Yeah.
or you like you're not even acknowledging that there's other pieces. You know what I mean? And if you keep moving forward in that way, and you essentially you are closed-minded, and I think as humans we have this. A lot of us have this need or want to be right, and that feeds into it as well because when you idolize something, you tend to see that as the right way to do something.
Yeah, it's like the benchmark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And then, that person does something that doesn't align with that, but you still keep defending them because you chose that, and you want to be right, and you don't want to be wrong, And that's when you see like certain people fall.
Yeah.
They've been idolized for such a long time, then something comes out about them, a sketchy skeleton in the closet. But then you also see people that still just staunchly defend them,
Yeah.
even though you clearly know that what they did was wrong, and it's unequivocal, like it's fact.
Yeah.
It's been proven, right?
Yeah.
And there's something to that. You know what I mean? Like the fact that people hold on and defend things because they've idolized them for such a long period of time or for whatever reason, that they don't want to back down. I think that's an issue with idolizing something as well. It's like you've kind of hitched your wagon to it and you refuse to unhitch for whatever reason. And is that because like you just want to be right? You don't want people to see that maybe you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, those sorts of things, I feel like they could be deep-seated and they could vary case by case as well. It's down to the individual. And, like if we talk generally, it's this, like you said, it's this culture of being right, and what the other end of that, I guess, means is being wrong, and the embarrassment that comes with that and things like that. But I think, like you said, we are conditioned to see certain things and want to see certain things. And I'll go back to, the world that we live in. Like the society and the matrix analogy, it's perfect because this is an ideal in my mind, right? In that we have been born into and we've been conditioned to idolize as the one and only reality that we live. But everyone knows that that there is a world outside of it, right? And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I guess it's what am I? I'm not saying that you can't, I guess, necessarily have your foot in both worlds, or there's a mixture of two. All I'm saying is that it is not the ultimate and end all. You're not gonna die if you step outside of the societal boundaries. You're not. You can still survive. It's going to be different to everything that you've been taught, and it's going to be fucking vastly different because you've been conditioned to only know this thing. That's what the point is, right? But what I'm saying is there is definitely other ways or modes of operation outside of it, 100%, like unequivocally, right? There are still, tribes people who live outside of like, civilized life, and fucking still thrive as they have for, generations and generations. They don't ascribe to any of the bullshit that, society and government and civilization, are bound by. They have their own systems and it works for them. So, like, again, I'm not saying one is right or wrong. All I'm saying is that when you only see one ideal as the ultimate, then maybe you, I guess, close your eyes or turn a blind eye to everything else that is.
Yeah. And you're also closing yourself off from other options and realities that might put you in a better position in life. And I think another thing that's really interesting, is that there's your truth and then there's the truth. And by that I mean like there's things that are the way they are, and then there's the way you wish things were or would be, right? And I learned that recently in terms of once you come to that realization, you can start to affect things that you want to change, that you can, but there are certain things that you aren't able to change, that we need to live with, right? And once you realize that, you have a much more pleasant existence in terms of you can focus on the things that you're able to change and do something about them, and not be so fixated on the things that you can't just because you wish they were a certain way.
Yeah.
Like there is a reality to things.
Yeah. And like, I think a good way to explain that, like, the Taoist approach to it, they call it the way, like that the Tao is the way, right?
Yeah.
And what they're referring to is the law of the universe, the law of nature.
Yeah.
And that is obviously something that is out of the control of any human, right? Like we can't change the rhythm of the seasons as they come. We can't change when the sun rises and when the sun sets. But if you compare those to the laws that govern civilization, those are man-made laws. They aren't changeable. They're not absolute. So even though they are, I guess they have a very strong governing presence in the world that we live. They're not absolute. We made them,
Yeah.
so we can very well change them if we wanted to. And I'm not saying you and me. I'm saying figuratively humans, because it was made by human beings. Those are laws that can be changed. But like I said, the laws of nature, they're obviously above our control. So why get mad when it rains? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's like using that example, right? Like there's things that you can control. For example, if you think of something like, say you're a personal trainer, right? And you train people outdoors. You might wish that everybody just trained no matter what the temperature was. And if it's raining or not, people should just not care about the weather because it doesn't really affect you, and train outdoors. That's what you want to happen so that you can make money by training people outdoors and people actually turn up to the sessions. The reality is most people don't like working out in the cold and wet, right? So you have your reality of what you wish it was like, and then there's the reality which everyone else is ascribing to, right? And you need to play for that. And what you can't change, or is very unlikely going to change, is people's, hate for the cold and the rain. What you can change is maybe train people indoors, right? So just because you wish it's a certain way, it doesn't mean that's how it is.
Yeah.
And you need to just shift the parts that you can shift. You're not going to change whether it's raining either, like you said, right? The reality is the weather's going to do what it wants to do. You're not going to be able to affect that. And just because you feel that there should be sunny days every Saturday when you want to train people doesn't mean that's what's going to happen.
And like, to that point, like I've seen this happen. Like, you see it happen everywhere, right? People get upset or pissed off about things that, to me anyway, I personally feel that they're petty, or they're just things that there's no consequence to being upset at them or being aggravated by it. It's only creating a negative experience for you. That's all it does.
That's right. Yeah.
For you to cling on to something or be upset at something that you have no control over.
Yeah.
Exactly your example. If that personal trainer got upset and pissed off every time, it rained, then what is the consequence? He just has a bad day.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So I think that, in terms of like expectation, is one of those things that you can just very easily, I guess, observe within yourself in every situation that you enter yourself into, and just see, what am I measuring this against? And is it actually something that is within my control? And if it's not, then why the fuck am I getting upset about it, you know?
Yeah. And it is one of those things, man. Like when you start to acknowledge that there's certain things that you're not going to be able to change, right? Because like you know me, man. I'm all about control. I try to control the things I can control. Very much. Like I don't. There's this negative connotation on control, whereas I see it the total opposite. Right? Like I like being in control. And but I also learned, man, there's some things that you just cannot control, and you need to play for that reality. You need to understand those things, and you know what is within your control and what's not within your control. Because if you keep thinking that you're going to be able to control things that you actually aren't, you're always going to be in that negative space mentally because you're not going to be able to get what you want, right? Or you expect things to be a certain way based on what you want to happen, and that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, all you do is put yourself in negative states, like, you know, you give yourself stress, anxiety, all those sorts of things, just to trying to, and this comes back to the stories you tell yourself, you
Yeah.
know, trying to, you know, will yourself mentally or even in illusion
Yeah.
to where you feel like you want to be, but obviously it's not within your control to be in
No.
such a state, right?
And even things as simple as you want someone to feel a certain way about something.
Yeah.
Like, you don't control that. You don't control how other people feel about things. So I feel it's much better to understand why people feel the way they feel about things
Yeah.
and then go from there. And if there's something I can do to maybe make you feel better or to make you understand from a different perspective, then I'll do that. But to just think, oh, like, why do you feel like that? Like, you should feel this way. That word should, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, it's not reality. You can't affect how people feel, like, just based on, or you can't expect people to feel a certain way, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's not real life.
Absolutely. It's like if we tie it back to the topic of conversation in terms of idols, and we say that it's about the highest individual ideal, right? That's what we're talking about in terms of idol, right? It is one individual's highest held ideal in their mind. And whatever that is, imagine that was like, it was represented as like a shape, a square, and then trying to push every individual, you know, that you know, which is obviously a different shape, into that fucking hole. It just it's irrational, it's illogical, and it just doesn't. It's just not reality, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, anything else that you might want to cover there with regards to that topic, bro?
Not really, man. It's
Yeah.
interesting because, yeah, I haven't thought about it. I had thought about it a lot, you know, previously, but I haven't thought about it in a while. But I think it's also interesting in the times we live in that there are so many idols out there and people idolizing things. And I guess the one thing you know, want to touch on again is just like the blindness people have when it comes to idols.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, and like in anything, you need to get the full picture on stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel that when we idolize things, we do tend to turn a blind eye to certain things that maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah. And I guess to close, like the sentiment that I would like to leave everyone with is just that sense of comparison that we tend, or we sort of lean towards when we hold people in high regard, and anyone, you know, for that matter. You might see someone that has something you feel you want and you don't have, and you compare yourself, and then, like you were saying, mate, you take away a little bit of yourself, you diminish a little bit of yourself as a result. So, you know, really be, I think that, like, you know, like I said, I'm always about owning your own truth and, you know, just loving yourself for who you are and all that sort of stuff. And this doesn't need to be a, you know, a self-love hippy-dippy thing. It really doesn't. Like, you just have to, like, your truth is yours, and it is unique, and it's beautiful, and it is truly beautiful when you recognize it and you enact it and you express it out to the world, right? And there is nothing better for any individual to understand their own truth, own their own truth, and express their own truth into the world and manifest it in whatever way you feel is the best way to express it. There is nothing better. Like, if you gave me that and someone else's life, fuck someone else's life. I don't want to be that. Comparison is this thing where there is a lack, an individual lack.
Yes.
So it's really good to sort of just take a step back and think about that. Like, what is it about, this other set of like circumstances that appeals to me in this particular moment? And will it appeal to me if I actually, stepped in those shoes?
Yeah.
And what is it that, conversely is I feel missing within my own, circumstance? That to me is, I guess, the learning we should take from, putting other ideals up in high regard and like setting ourselves up for failure, as you said.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, man, and really good thing for people to take away. It's like work out what it is that you want.
Yeah,
from
essentially. We always come back to that, man.
And that's it. Like, that's making the comparison, and that's something really useful that can come out of it. There's a saying, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like most anger or disappointment comes from comparison.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And it's because,
Sure.
and I've said it like a million times today, but I'll say it again. It's like you're also, a lot of times we're making comparisons based on, without having the full set of information.
Yeah.
Or the full view. Right? And we think things are a certain way, but they're not actually that way. So like everything we talk about, man, you got to peel back the layers and you got to uncover things and you got to think about things critically and make sure that you get as much of the picture as you can, because it's not always possible to get the full picture either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man, we might wrap it there. But how about you tell everyone where they can find you, man?
Yeah, easiest place to find me is on Instagram. So Shaun_Coop. It's just SHAUN_COOP. And how about you, bro?
Yep, just on my website, findingspace.co. My Insta and Facebook is the same as well. It's at findingspace.co. If you want to connect to my personal Insta, I've also unprivated that now. So if you want to connect with me there, feel free. Leslie K. Lau. So LESLIEKLAU. Other than that, you can email Shaun and I through our email address for the podcast. If you have any questions about this particular episode or any others, if you want to suggest a guest or you want to come on as a guest, just send us an email, thehustleandflowpodcast@gmail.com.
Cool, man. And as always, guys, for listening, we just ask for a little fee. Just if you found some value in this, you took out a little nugget, something that's, sparked some more thought in you, something to think about, and you think it might do the same for someone else, please just share it with one other person, a friend, a colleague, family member, someone that might find this conversation, thought-provoking or enjoyable. We're on Spotify, iTunes, and Stitcher. Really easy to share out. And if you could take a moment to just pop down a review for us, give us a rating, it really helps us to, get these conversations out into the ears of people, because we want to get these conversations out so people hear them, might start thinking a bit more, and might be able to do better as they think a bit more critically for themselves. So until next time, guys.
All right, see you guys.